Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge and our tutorial series on World in Flames Collector's Edition. Now I've been receiving several questions from viewers regarding how to set up a game of World in Flames, which is not surprising given the size and complexity of the game. And I thought it might be of some value, especially to folks brand new to the game, to do a video showing you the process, and it really is a process, of setting up a game of World in Flames. And to do so, we're going to walk through that process in this video today. We're going to use as the example the very first introductory scenario, Victory in the West, 24.2.1 in the rulebook. And we'll go through, I'll talk about how you do each of the various steps to get to the point where you're ready to actually start pushing pieces and rolling dice. I'll also make some comments regarding the setup tables that the game uses, as they are a little unconventional and they do take some getting used to. So let's go ahead and see what we need to do from basically out of the box right up until we're ready to start the very first turn of the game. Now, everything you're going to need to set up the game will be found in the Campaign and Player's Guide booklet. You can see if we open here to the table of contents on the first page inside, you'll see they list all of the campaigns available, or the scenarios available, and they break them down by the number of maps used. So you have your one map campaigns, which are going to be your smaller, or rather smallest scenarios in the game. Then they've got some two map games, which generally break things down into either the European theater or the Pacific theater. And then you get into the big four map campaigns. The World in Flames series campaigns here at the bottom, these are campaigns that can be played. However, they are going to require the ownership of one of the other games in the World in Flames family, either Days of Decision, America in Flames, or Patton in Flames. So first thing you're going to need to do is choose which scenario you want to play. And since setting up all of the scenarios follows the same basic process, we're just going to keep this fairly simple today, and we're going to choose the Victory in the West, the very first scenario in the book, and the smallest at that. Now, the first thing you need to do after choosing which scenario to play is to choose your sides. And WIF can be played by anywhere from 2 to 6 players, and considering the fact that the only hidden intel in the game really is just the US entry status, it actually plays solo reasonably well. Now, there are 8 major powers that are playable in the game, which exceeds the maximum recommended player count, and therefore you're going to have to assign multiple major powers in some instances to players. And the game helps you out with that by providing a recommended major power groups chart here in the Campaign and Player Guide. It's on page 2, right across from the table of contents here. And you'll see they break it down by scenario. So all of the 4 map scenarios, if you're playing any of those 4 map scenarios, you'll use this first column. The next 2 columns are for the 2 map scenarios, either the European 2 map scenario, Fascist Tide, or the Pacific 2 map scenarios here. And it's broken down by player count, 3, 4, 5, or 6 players. You can see that the 2 map campaigns are not recommended for 5 or 6 player counts because you are in those scenarios dealing with either only the European theater or only the Pacific theater. And so not all of the major powers are involved in those particular scenarios. So how this would work is, let's say you had 5 players getting together to play the game. You would come down here to the 5 players. If you're going to play the 1939 Global War scenario, that's a 4-map scenario. One player would take Germany, the second would be Italy and Japan, and then the 3 allied players, one would control China and the USSR, a second would be France and USA, and the last allied player would control the Commonwealth. Now, when it comes to choosing sides, usually our group will just do so based on mutual agreement. We all have our favorite major powers to play, but we've also all played all of the major powers over the years, and we don't have an objection to playing any of the major powers. Now, that may not be the case necessarily in your group, or You may find yourself playing World in Flames at a convention. I think WIFCon is still a going concern, as well as Euro WIFCon, which I think is held over in Germany each year. Anyway, for a convention setting or more of a competitive setting, WIF includes a bidding mechanism to determine who will play which major power. And I want to take just a moment here to discuss this bidding mechanism, even though personally I can count maybe, well, on one hand easily the number of times I've used this bidding process to play World in Flames over the last, I don't know, 30 years or so. But let's take a look at it real quick, because I did have a few viewers state that they were a little confused about that. Now, how the bidding process works is you will have an auction style bid where each player will bid a certain number, and then the next player will bid a number greater than that one, and so on until it comes back around where a player can then increase their bid, and so on until they pass, and then they are out of the bidding for that round. The player who bids the highest will end up having the first choice for which major power grouping that they're going to control. You're then going to have a second auction with the remaining players who will bid, and whoever eventually ends up being the highest bidder in that round will get the second choice, and so on until all of the countries are assigned. Now, what are you bidding? Each of your bid, it's going to be a number that is a whole number greater than or equal to minus 20 or up. So the bidding can actually start in the negatives. And you're bidding on basically the number of objectives, either more or less than your expected total that you think you're going to control at the end of the game. And there is a chart in the Campaign and Player's Guide on page 3 here, which shows the expected totals for each of the major powers in the game. This number represents what is the expected total of objectives for that major power to control at the end of the various scenarios. And you can see down here at the bottom, for the 4-map campaigns, which use all the maps, there are a total of 70 objectives in the game. If you're only using the 2-map campaigns like Fascist Tide or Rising Sun, you'll see that there are basically 41 objectives on the European maps and 37 in the Pacific. So that's going to affect, obviously, what you would be bidding if you were playing those scenarios. Now, what is an objective? Objectives are cities located on the map, and they are identified by having their names printed in red. And I'll show you a couple of examples of objectives when we get the map set up for our 1940 Victory in the West scenario. So what you're going to do is, basically, the higher you bid, the better you think you're going to do. And therefore, the players that are most bullish on their own prospects for controlling objectives on the map are going to be the ones that are going to get first choice to run various countries. Now, there's an extended example here in the campaign guide below the chart. It looks like, if I read that correctly, there's a couple of little errors where the math is off by one, but the process is correct. What would happen is you're going to take your bid, and then your bid is going to be added or subtracted to the number here in the chart for all of the major powers that you're going to control. So we'll start with a simple one. Let's say in the first round, a player wins the bid with a bid of 5. They decide they want to play Germany. And we're going to play the 1939 Global War scenario, which is a 4-map campaign. So they select Germany, and you can see Germany is expected to control 5 objectives at the end of that campaign. You then take 5, you will add the winning bid of 5 to that, giving them a modified bid of 10. And then that is going to be recorded on your build charts for reference at the end of the game to determine individual player victory. Now, In some cases, if you have only 3 or 4 players, players will be playing more than one major power. For instance, if somebody has a winning bid of 4 and they decide they're going to play Italy and Japan in that same global war campaign, you can see Italy has an expected objectives of 1 and Japan has an expected objectives of 5. You add those two together for a total of 6, plus the 4 that was bid, giving this person a modified bid total of 10 as well. Now, how does it work if somebody bids in the negatives? If maybe folks have seen they've been outbid and they've seen other players select the countries they really want to play, and whatever's left in the game, they're really kind of not that confident in playing. So maybe they bid -4. Well, it's the same way. You're just going to add that to the numbers here of the total of all of the major powers you're playing. Let's say you're not real comfortable playing as the Soviet Union, and so you bid -4, and you end up choosing the USSR and China. Well, China has 3, USSR has 14. That would be a total of 17, plus your bid of -4 gives you a modified bid of 13. That's essentially how this all works. Now, the last person that is going to have something assigned to them, they don't obviously have to bid against themselves. They automatically will get whatever remaining major powers there are for a modified bid of 0 plus the total of all of the other bids. So if it was a 4-player game and the first player had a winning bid of 7 and the second player had a winning bid of 4 and the third player had a winning bid of -5, that would be 7 plus 4 is 11 minus 5 is 6. The fourth player would get whatever countries are left, but his modified bid would be 0 minus the total of 6. So he would be looking at a -6 as a modification to the number of objectives he holds at the end of the game as far as determining victory. So it's a little bit of a, I don't want to say convoluted process, and it's not nearly as complicated as it sounds. If you were to actually participate in it in a game and see how it works, you'd become a lot more comfortable with it. The important thing to keep in mind, though, is that as you're bidding, you're not necessarily bidding for a specific country. You're bidding for the right to choose who you want to play from the remaining powers. You definitely want to keep in mind the total number of objectives as well as where they are located. And for that, we'll take a quick look at the very back of the campaign and players guide. You can see here, essentially it's on the inside cover. There are 2 pages. This is, if I can zoom in here, this is the game victory point objectives. It lists all of the objectives in the game, as well as showing, I believe, which major power controls that objective at every given turn in the game. They've got a chart on that page and the next page, which is 94. So there's 93 and 94. This one, the difference here is it's historical victory point objectives. I believe this is showing historically which major power controlled which of these objectives on any given turn in the game. So it's a little something, kind of an interesting little study to look at, but it also is helpful for you if you're getting familiar with the game, or as you're getting familiar with the game, to just see exactly what are all of the objectives at a glance, laid out very easily for you to read, and then you can go and find those on the map and give you a little better idea with that. But as I stated earlier, the bidding process is usually something you're only going to find when you're in a competitive setting for World in Flames, or perhaps at something like a convention where you're playing with folks you don't know. So that being said, we've got bidding out of the way. The next step we're going to do after we've determined which scenario we're playing and we've chosen sides, we're going to lay out the map. So let's do that now.